Good afternoon, and welcome to Mountain Musings. Today we're looking at Discipleship, Part 2, Not Alone. I want to read a passage here. Iron sharpens iron, and one man sharpens another. Proverbs 27:17, English Standard Version. Our popular culture paints a picture of a man going at life alone, strong enough to face the troubles and turmoils that we face in this world alone. If you grew up in the American Southwest, like I did, we we like the picture of a cowboy or a pioneer wrestling his future out of the desert Southwest on his own. Think of the old Marlboro Man commercials. You know, the cowboy out there, the grizzled, tough old man who has been around the block and really doesn't need anyone. That's what we think of, and our culture lifts that up today. Even though it's not true, we like to think of snipers as solitary men out there navigating the perils of the battlefield all on their own. When in fact, in reality, snipers work in teams. They work together. Uh, the truth is, we do not do very well alone. We need one another, especially those of us who are disciples of the Lord and are working on getting through this life, hopefully growing in our walk with the Lord, becoming better. In Genesis, we read an interesting passage. Then the Lord God said, "It is not good that man should be alone. I will make him a helper fit for him." Genesis 2:18. And while this passage specifically describes the creation of women, one of the things that I want to think about and I want to focus on today is this idea that God does not want us to face this life alone. He wants us to do this in the fellowship of other believers. C.S. Lewis, in his book, The Four Loves, describes male friendship this way. Friendship is born at the moment when one man says to another, "What, you too? I thought that no one but myself." He goes on to say, friendship is unnecessary. Like philosophy, like art, it has no survival value. Rather, it is one of those things that give value to survival. Perhaps the reason that we in our modern American culture don't value friendship is the way we toss the word around. We speak of friendship when really we're talking about acquaintances. In many other cultures, perhaps most other cultures in the world, a man might have only one or two good friends in his lifetime, and he values them very highly. Their friendships mean a lot to him. My grandfather, who was in the Army during World War II and served in the China, Burma, India theater, made a friend of an Indian, someone whom he survived combat with. Years later, when I was perusing his belongings after he died, I found a packet of letters that were from this Indian friend. And in the letters, I read one side of a very deep and meaningful conversation. Now, not all the letters were full of great, deep, meaningful things, but they were all very personal. They were all very intense. And they talked about friendship, they talked about family, they talked about work, they talked about sports. This Indian man was a great fan of cricket, no surprise there. But I only heard one half of the conversation. I'm not sure what the letters from my grandfather contained, but they were important enough to him. The relationship was important enough to him that he kept all the letters. He had this friend who was separated by an ocean and a continent that he felt was important enough to carry on the relationship. And friendship, true friendship, is critical to our walk as disciples. And I want to look at three things. I want to look at education, and I want to look at support, and I want to look at accountability. These are only three of the things that are important to us as friends, but I want to look at those in some depth today. First of all, I want to look at education. I don't know about you, but life seems to throw a dizzying, unending array of challenges to me. Even though I'm retired and in the latter innings of my life, I still find many different challenges, things that I did not imagine that I would face. And so I have to sort my way through those. And a good friend helps me do that, especially a friend who is older than I am. I'm part of two men's groups. In one group, I'm the oldest guy there. In the other group, I'm the youngest guy. I like being in both groups because in the one group where I'm the oldest, I get a chance to share my experience. In the group in which I'm the youngest, I go to them for counsel. Hey, I'm facing this. Have you faced it? So I find that very helpful. In Proverbs, we read, listen to advice and accept instruction that you may gain wisdom in the future. Proverbs 19:20. You see, the writer of Proverbs expects you and I to listen to the men around us. Now, in the ancient Middle East, the man who you would be listening to would be an older man who had already walked with the Lord for some time. But the point is, we gain much from each other. We get much in the way of instruction. And walking alone, we lose out on all that experience. The next thing I want to talk about is encouragement. Speaking of encouragement, one of the things that is just true in this world is that life throws us curves, and every once in a while we get beamed by one. And I wasn't a big baseball player, but I did play Little League, and I was hit a couple of times by errant pitches, and it hurts. And sometimes life throws us a curve, and we get smacked upside our head, and oh, it hurts. Jesus spoke about this. I have said these things to you, that in me you may have peace. In the world you will have tribulation, but take heart. I have overcome the world. John 16:33. Now, none of us get through this life without pains and bumps and bruises and scrapes. Sometimes we are hurt terribly. We may be denied a promotion that we either thought we needed or perhaps deserved. Sometimes we just lose our jobs. I remember in the Army, I didn't get promoted one time when I thought I ought to be. And that was a painful experience. And friends fail us, families fail us. Sometimes sickness and death come our way. In the past 3 years, I lost both of my parents. So these are all things that discourage us. Sometimes we look out at the world and we find ourselves quite discouraged just by the state of things. It doesn't even have to be our personal state. It can be just the state of things in the world. Having brothers that have walked with us, who have perhaps walked longer than we have, helps us because they can encourage us and help us to remember that these things will pass. In 1 Thessalonians, Paul encouraged people, therefore encourage one another and build one another up, just as you are doing. 1 Thessalonians 5:11. Paul encouraged the Thessalonians, hey, encourage one another. Don't just go this alone. Encourage one another. In Galatians, he says, bear one another's burdens and so fulfill the law of Christ. Through encouragement, our brothers help us bear the load. And that's an important thing. Sometimes all the rocks in our rucksack just get too much. Having a brother there to help us, to encourage us, to help us carry the load, helps us get through these tough spots in life. Lastly, I want to look at accountability. Looking at accountability. Accountability is the process by which our brothers sometimes hold us accountable, help us see that our actions are not wise, or our actions are actually not the actions of a Christian. At one point in my life, I hate to admit this, but I was engaged in a wide variety of despicable activities, just things that were not right, things that did not glorify God. And a good friend of mine looked at me one day and said, Matt, do you consider yourself a Christian? Do you consider yourself a Christian? Those words hurt. They were blunt and they were hard, but I needed to hear them because what they did was they made me look at my life and they made me realize that, in fact, I was not living as a Christian would live. And it took a while. It took prayer, it took time, the godly counsel of my good friend, but eventually I walked out of that and walked into a better way of living. In Proverbs, we read, faithful are the wounds of a friend, profuse are the kisses of an enemy. Proverbs 27:6. See, my friend wounded me. It hurt for me to hear that. But he was holding me accountable. He was saying, hey, do you consider yourself a Christian? Sometimes our brothers are the right person to point out these kind of things. Now, he did so in a loving way. He didn't berate me. He didn't say you're a jerk. He just asked the honest question, do you still consider yourself a Christian? And that's accountability. Acquaintances don't hold us accountable. Friends hold us accountable. And that is why we need good, believing Christian friends. We need those men who have walked the path, who have walked the way before us, who know the pitfalls, who have authority to speak into our lives. We know and trust them, and we know that they will give us good counsel. Mere acquaintances won't do that. That is why it is very important for you and I to have good, godly Christian friends. Men who will look at us and ask the hard questions, the tough questions that we need to answer in order to maintain our walk with the Lord. So I encourage you today, make sure that you have good friends who are Christians, not just acquaintances, not someone you just say hello to in the aisle as you make your way out of the pew and out the door after worship. Make sure you have some good men who have walked the path before you, some older brothers, and some other brothers who have the authority to speak into your life. That's very important. Having good friends helps us be good disciples, and it helps us live into this passage. Rather, speaking the truth in love, we are to grow up in every way into Him who is the head, into Christ. Ephesians 4:15. So, if you don't have good Christian friends, I encourage you, prayerfully go out and seek them. And if you do have good Christian friends, strengthen those relationships because we all need them. Thank you for listening. As always, you can access the written version of this in the link below. Please leave comments. I need both encouragement and I need good counsel, ways that I can make this better. Have a good day.